The Metal Gear series is known for having some of the most innovative bosses in all of gaming, from bosses that require you to switch your controller's port, to others who can be defeated by setting your game's internal clock ahead so that they die of old age. Skips and glitches used in the speedrun are equally fantastic, and while these weren't planted in the game by Kojima for players to find, teams of glitch hunters have labored tirelessly for almost 25 years to find them, except for the latest discovery that happened entirely by accident during a player's first playthrough. Today we'll be looking at how this new skip was found, how it works, and what it meant for the speedrun. I hope you enjoy today's video.
What? Help me? Help.
Before we get started, if you'd check out my Patreon and consider becoming a member, that would be awesome. It helps me level up my software and hardware so I can keep improving the videos, and you get some cool rewards based on what tier you subscribe at. And with that, let's get into the video. August 14th, 2021 would be a typical day for Metal Gear speedrunners, but for Boba, it would be anything but. Boba is a member of the Yogscast, an entertainment group that focuses on gaming content on YouTube and Twitch, and on this particular day, she was streaming her very first playthrough of Metal Gear Solid. She came to a portion of the game where you're required to navigate a set of communication towers, A and B, with Comm Tower A being the first. This is a very difficult section, as you're pursued by guards throughout your climb, but the game does offer you a shortcut between the two towers that's accessible with a keycard. There's just one problem. When you try to access the door, Otacon calls to tell you that it's frozen from the other side, so you will have to go to the top of the tower and work your way back down to get it unstuck. When Boba came to this section, she learned all too quickly that the door wouldn't be much help in its current state, and she was having a difficult time with all of the enemies. After a few deaths, she once again came to the door and decided to stand her ground, except this time, something very bizarre happened.
Help me? Help. Help? What happened? Hello? What? Are you fucking with me right now? Are you
How did Boba manage to get through the door if it was frozen from the other side? It wasn't clear what happened, but when Boba tweeted about the skip, the Metal Gear speedrunners immediately started trying to recreate the trick. There was a ton of mystery surrounding how Boba was able to get through the door. Was it dependent on the platform she was playing on? Did the weapon she was using play a factor? Does the camera's position play a role? Things were moving fast, but the same night, someone would replicate the glitch. Victus confirmed that the glitch was reproducible and not a random one-off quirk that Boba had encountered. He was able to recreate it on emulator, which was the same platform that Boba was playing on. At the time, no one had been able to skip the door on PC or console versions of the game, and a fear started to grow that this was exclusive to emulator. This would have been unfortunate, as the majority of runs are done on the PC version of the game due to some features it has that console doesn't, such as weapon hotkeys, the ability to instantly progress through codec messages, and perhaps most importantly, PC-only skips. This fear grew as more runners were able to replicate it on emulator, and no one had found a setup on another platform. But the tension would be cut when SolidTony would be the first to skip the door on PC, proving that this skip could be included in runs on the fastest platform. So, how does it work? The door is intended to be used after the player gets it unstuck, so there is a loading zone on the other side of it. Normally, you can only enter the trigger when the door is open, but something was going on to allow you to hit it while the door was closed, and there were 3 different things at work that made this glitch possible: Snake's position, the guards damaging you, and a peculiar property of this particular loading zone. When Snake enters a door, his hitbox collides with a trigger volume attached to the loading zone. This tells the game that Snake should be loaded to the next area. So the first part of the trick requires getting Snake in a precise position while facing a specific angle. The reason the angle needs to be exact is because when you take damage, Snake's hitbox gets a tiny bit bigger for a few frames. So by having Snake in a very specific position and angle, when he takes damage from the guards, his hitbox will momentarily overlap with the loading zone for the door, letting him proceed without unlocking it first. When runners learned this was the reason for why the glitch was working, they tried to perform it on other doors in the game to no avail. So what was different about the frozen door in Comm Tower A that allowed Snake to clip into the load zone? In a casual playthrough, you're normally required to blow the door open from the other side with C4 to remove the ice keeping it shut. And for some strange reason, while the door is in the frozen state, the trigger volume for the load zone is moved closer to the frame, which allows for Snake to clip through and enter it if you can get him into the correct position. Runners were ecstatic that the skip was possible, but it had a high fail rate as finding the perfect angle was very difficult to do. But before someone could gamble on it working in a speedrun, King Jaguar found a setup that was highly consistent. By holding a weapon called the SOCOM, he found that if you ran Snake into the door and moved him to the far left of the frame, that you could aim at the guards as they came up the stairs to put yourself in the correct angle so that when they shot you, your extended hitbox would overlap with the loading trigger. This was quickly replicated, meaning that a reliable setup had been found that could be used in the speedrun. There was just one issue. Players normally don't pick up the SOCOM in runs, so any potential time save would have to be greater than the time lost going out of your way to get the weapon. Fortunately, getting the SOCOM only costs 2 seconds, and the Boba skip saves a whopping 2 minutes. So what does it skip? If we look at the gameplay intended route, to unlock the door, we see that it requires reaching the top of Com Tower A, rappelling down the side of it, and then clearing 3 guards on the catwalk. The rappel section is very challenging on the higher difficulties of the game, as you have to avoid environmental hazards while being shot at by a helicopter, and deal with the catwalk guards, who typically kill runs as their shots cause knockback, so any trick that allowed runners to skip this section would be a welcome addition. There was a further issue that hadn't been tested yet. Metal Gear Solid runs on a flag system. What this means is that when you complete events in the game, it sets a flag in the code for other things to happen. Let's look at an example. Pokemon Legends Arceus runs on a flag system where each story checkpoint in the game won't function properly unless the preceding checkpoint has been completed. This was a huge frustration to speedrunners who had found a way to skip the tutorial only to find out that the next NPC they were required to talk to wouldn't interact with them, as his flag for being active wasn't getting set. And if you want a full explanation of why Legends Arceus has been exceedingly difficult for speedrunners to break, check out this video I made on the topic. So how does performing Boba skip interact with the flag system in Metal Gear Solid? When you complete the rappel section normally, the game sets a flag to spawn the guards on the catwalk, but since we never rappel down the building, the guards are never spawned. So far, so good. Fortunately for speedrunners, the flag after the guards doesn't get affected by skipping them, as the game sets it to active when you enter the small building on the other side of the catwalk, meaning that progression logic remains 100% intact when using Boba skip. With this confirmed, you'd think that world records would start getting set with a 2-minute time save ripe for the taking, but developments on Boba skip were moving fast, and a new setup that didn't require getting the SOCOM was found by JaguarKing. Instead of taking the 2 seconds to pick up the SOCOM, he looked at items that you would already have in your inventory as part of the route, and he found a setup with the chaff grenade that did the trick. Normally, chaff grenades are used to disable surveillance cameras and gun turrets, but they also cause a small amount of damage to Snake, which triggers the hitbox expansion. This meant that taking damage from the guards wasn't necessary for the trick anymore, but it did change the angle that was required for it to work. Runner DLimes13 would further explore the chaff grenade setup, and he found that if you line up the left edge of the alert box with a crease on the wall, that you'll put Snake in a reliable position so that when you detonate a chaff grenade in your hand, the recoil animation Snake does puts the extended hitbox into contact with the load trigger. And with that, runners were now ready to route the skip into the speedrun. When it comes to Metal Gear Solid speedruns, there are 2 main categories that attract the most runners: any percent and all bosses, which further break down into subcategories by difficulty and rank. Difficulty is selected at the start of the run, with 4 different levels being available to the player. As the difficulty scales higher, more restrictions are placed on the player, with some of the more notable ones being improved guard AI, more damage from enemies and bosses, and the classic restriction of health items. Rank is the title given to the player at the end of the game, with additional requirements being put in place to achieve the higher titles. For the big boss rank, players are required to use 0 continues, only receive 3 to 4 alerts, kill 25 or less enemies, use 1 or less rations, keep their radar off, and save less than 80 times. This creates a lot of different categories for the game to be run in, with the fastest being the any percent no rank on the very easy difficulty. Before the skip was found, the record was 30 minutes on the nose, with Nick RP Green setting the first sub-30 run the day after Boba skip was discovered. If we look at the extreme difficulty Big Boss category, where the skip has the most effect due to the sections it avoids being incredibly challenging, the record stood at 38:52 and was set by Metal Glenn Solid, with Glenn dropping it by almost 2 full minutes for a 36:56 just a few days after the skip was found. In terms of the any percent run, this isn't the skip that saves the most time. That belongs to a very complex skip that takes place in the Comm Tower B. The details will have to be explained another time, but it unloads the tower and allows the player to skip 7 bosses, saving 25 minutes in total. If we look at the All Bosses category, where the Comm Tower B skip can't be used, we see that Boba skip is a welcomed addition to the category, since it doesn't skip any bosses, making it one of the largest skips in the category, with top times clocking in around an hour. Runners had previously broken the sub-hour barrier in this category, but with Boba skip, more contenders were able to push their times below the threshold, with the current record being a 57:39 by DLimes13. It's not often that skips are found in games that are almost a quarter of a century old, when teams of players have been trying to break it for the better part of the last decade. And when you take account of all the factors that Boba got correct by accident, it makes the discovery of Boba skip truly unique in the speedrunning ecosystem.
This is a bug? I am living the best life ever because I beat the video game. I am living the best life ever because I am out of the stairwell of shame. I am the best at video games, and no one can stop me or tell me the same because I'm the best at video games.
If you want to check out Metal Gear runs, I've left links to some runners down below. And for a detailed history on the Boba skip timeline, check out this video by Nick RP Green. If you enjoyed the content, consider supporting me on Patreon, as we're close to hitting the next patron goal where I'll set a release date for my next world record progression. If you're curious as to what game I'll be covering, check out the Goals tab. And as always, I hope to see you in the next video.